Hello and welcome to Coffee Lovers TV. On the show today, I'm going to be showing you how to make an espresso using an Aeropress. Now, first things first, I'm just going to dive in and show you how to do it, and then I'm going to talk about it. And it's very straightforward. Basically, espresso is all about pressure, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to use features of the Aeropress to create a lot of pressure and give us essentially an espresso, or espresso-like beverage is more like it. We're not going to be able to get to the high pressures that an actual espresso machine can get. I'm going to talk about some of that later, but first, let's go through the steps. What you need. This is actually really important. You need a good sturdy surface to press on, because we're going to be putting as much pressure through this as we can. You also need a good sturdy mug. I've got these old sort of almost diner style, really heavy duty mugs. I'm going to be able to put a lot of pressure onto this. I don't have to worry about the mug breaking or anything like that. Same with the table, no worries. Next, of course, you need your Aeropress. I'm going to show you, when I do the quick walkthrough, I'm going to be using paper filter, and I'm just going to be using one. Again, I'll talk about other options afterwards, including metal filter options, which you can use. But for this demo, because the process is the same, I'm just going to be using the paper filter. And then I am going to be showing you how to do this with a stir stick. You can use the one that comes with the Aeropress. Actually, don't know where mine is, so I just have this glass one. You can also do this without stirring, but I've actually found I enjoy the result a bit more with the stir. Then you need a scale. We're not going to be pressing on the scale. I'll go over that in the steps. And coffee and water, of course. As long as you have the Aeropress, this is all pretty straightforward. Don't really need anything that special. I'm going to adjust the camera, bring you a little bit closer, go through the steps, and then I'll talk about the results and then different options that you can use to adjust your espresso, your technique, and that sort of thing. So let's get to it. Okay, so the process for going through this is really straightforward. We're using pressure to create the extraction. So these steps are going to be really quick in succession. Because of that, I'm going to do a quick explaining walkthrough. So first things first, I'm using the paper filter on this, and I'm just going to use one. And actually, I can show you this part here. Since I'm using the paper filter, I'm going to give it a quick rinse and then talk through the rest while that does its thing. So always good to rinse when you're doing the paper filter. In essence, what we're going to do is I'm going to add coffee, and then I'm going to add water, and then I'm going to press as hard as I can really quickly. And I'm going to use 20 grams of coffee and 60 grams of water. Now, the simplicity of this method means that your result pretty much comes down to the grind size. And because of how simple this method is, it's going to be really consistent for you, assuming you apply a consistent level of pressure every single time. So it's not going to be perfect. This isn't going to be like you're getting it from a machine, but it's going to be one of the best low-cost espressos you can ever have. Now, as far as the grind size goes, I'm going to try to show you. So this is going to be finer than a drip, but not quite as fine as espresso. It has a sand-like quality to it. So we are dealing with a pretty fine grind. I'd say one of the nice things about this method is you can experiment quite a bit. So start with your espresso setting. Your result may be too astringent, in which case you want to make it coarser. I'll talk about that afterwards. So I've rinsed my Aeropress. So I'm gonna add 20 grams of coffee here. Normally this would be better if I weighed out the coffee beforehand, but I wanted a little bit extra so I could show you grind size. Okay, 20 grams of coffee. Now, I need it on the scale to weigh out the water. So I'm gonna shake that level. And now we add 60 grams of water. And then I'm going to give it a quick stir and then press almost immediately. And 60, 63, whatever, that's fine. Okay. So I'm stirring to make sure that everything is saturated, taking it off the scale and immediately pressing. And that's it. And there we have our espresso. All right, so that is as complex as it needs to be. That's a pretty well balanced tasting espresso. I mean, it's not perfect, and I don't think you can get it perfect. You really need a machine to do that. But this has a really nice thickness, a sweetness to it, and a good balance, sort of richness. It would be difficult for me to pull out distinct flavors like you can with an espresso machine, but I get a lot of the chocolatiness that this coffee should have. So I think it makes a pretty darn good espresso, especially considering it's coming from a tool that costs $20, right? Now, I showed you the grind size here. It's a little difficult to show on the camera, but you kind of see how that sort of clumps. It's that level of fineness, but it's not quite as fine as an actual espresso grind. But that kind of gives you an idea. I'm using, the grinder I'm using is the Breville grinder. It's a little hard for me to approximate compared to other grinders, because on the Breville grinder, 2/3 of the grind range is for espresso, and then the last third is like coarser grinds for hand brewing. It does a really great job of grinding. I'm going to be doing a different video on that. But if you use a Breville, I've been doing this at 35. I don't know how to equate that to other grinders, to be honest. The beauty of this process is that it's so simple, you can just play around with it. So start with something that's finer than you would use for any kind of drip method. If you have an espresso setting on your grinder, go ahead and just try that out, see how it comes out. This grind has a really good, rich sweetness to it. This espresso, I should say. If it was getting any more astringent, and I did try finer grinds, and it started getting really like clawing at the tongue with a lot more bitterness to it. And if I got any coarser, then it thinned out really fast, got sour. Those are the kinds of things you're looking for in the adjustments. That's one of the nice things about this method. You can play around with it really easy. A couple other things. I used the paper filters. Now, I've seen many other methods to make espresso that are much more involved in this, and I've tried them all. And honestly, I don't think that any of them make a better espresso than this. They end up different in different ways. You could start with the setup that I did and then throw or even press another filter on top. I've seen some people try to imitate creating the espresso puck like you do in a portafilter. But here's the thing with that. Espresso is all about pressure. And in those machines, they're designed in a way where a lot of the pressure is created because of the way the coffee sits in the portafilter. The pressure here, and maybe that has an influence. Maybe if you do create the puck, maybe it affects the pressure. But I think that, especially the way that I'm pressing, I mean, hopefully it turned out on the video. I basically, very important holding the Aeropress in place on your cup, but I basically am just throwing everything I have at that, pushing down as fast as I can with as much pressure as I can. I can't imagine that the way the coffee sits in the Aeropress is gonna have that much of an effect. And that the result kind of backs that up for me, in that I tried the whole process of one filter on the bottom, putting in the coffee, and then essentially tamping down with another object that fits into the Aeropress, another filter to create that puck, and the result had less dynamic flavors than this did. So to me, that's not better. This has chocolatey sweetness and a nice bright acidity to it, which this is as close to an espresso as I can get without using an espresso machine. Paper filter, really great. You only need one. You could possibly try adding a second one. That would probably increase the pressure, but I'm not sure it's necessary, although it'd be fun to experiment with. Now, as far as, that's the paper, you also have the option of a metal filter. So I have this fine mesh disc made by Able. Jesse from Conduit Conduit loaned this to me. Also, this is Conduit Coffee, so I'll link to them below. There are some differences. So one of the things about the paper filter is that paper filters in all kinds of coffee are going to absorb oils from that coffee. Now, you're still getting a lot of oils in this cup because we're using a lot of pressure. We are forcing a heck of a lot through the filter into the cup. This is a very thick cup of coffee. I still found that using the metal filter provided even a thicker, richer espresso. That's something to consider. If you're planning to make a whole lot of espresso with your Aeropress, I would definitely consider getting a metal filter, especially if you're planning on creating a lot of milk-based drinks, because I think the balance, the taste balance created with the metal filter is enough of a difference that when you're combining the coffee with milk, you're gonna want the extra oils, the extra thickness that comes through the metal filter that apparently the paper filter captures. Something to consider. You don't need it, but it creates an interesting, different dynamic that's a bit richer, a bit thicker perhaps, as more of the oils pass through. So again, in short, more oils in your cup with the metal filter, less with the paper filter, but you still get a thick, rich espresso using the paper filter. Some other things to consider. When I first started doing this, I actually wasn't stirring, and I did a number of tests with the stir and the not stir. My thought with the not stir was press as quickly as possible, let the pressure take care of it. I find that the cup is much more rounded flavor-wise when I stir, and that makes a lot of sense. When you do this, you'll find that you have clumps of coffee as you stir. It makes a lot of sense that if you don't stir, you're gonna end up with an uneven extraction. So I think a quick stir is actually really mandatory with this kind of process. And that actually backs up the previous assessment that creating a puck with this and then pouring on top is actually a bad idea. I think when you do that, you can't get an even extraction. So I really like this method. Coffee, water, stir, press. Very simple, creates a very good cup of coffee. As close to an espresso as I've gotten without an espresso machine, to be honest. And that's pretty much it. The rest is up to you. You take that base process and just play around with it. Really get to know the taste of your coffee. Doing this is going to give you a good, I think, good understanding of what well-extracted coffee should taste like. Because if you're off, if your grind is too fine, it's going to really claw at your tongue. If it's too coarse, it's just going to be sour and unenjoyable. And part of the fun of coffee is making those adjustments to figure out how to make the coffee taste like you want it to taste like. So this is a really fun process. Definitely go check it out. It's the Aeropress making espresso. All right, before I go, there's one more thing that I didn't touch upon in any of this, and that is crema. And it's a subject that I've seen come up pretty much every espresso video, especially in Aeropress videos, making espresso with the Aeropress. People obsess over creating crema when they are making an espresso. And here's the thing, crema is essentially CO2 and other fine coffee particulate matter suspended in oils on the surface of the coffee. It does not inherently have anything beneficial to your cup, certainly not taste-wise. And in fact, there are other videos I've done where in other brewing methods, removing that layer removes bitterness that gets in the way of tasting your coffee. In this process, you see that there is a little bit of crema layer on top of the espresso that I've created. And the only thing that really crema does is it's an indicator that coffee was brewed either with high pressure or that the coffee is really fresh, or possibly, you know, the way that coffee is processed can have an effect on that. It doesn't mean that the coffee is good if there is crema. It doesn't mean that the coffee is not good if there's no crema. It's really just a coincidental effect of the brewing process. So you don't need to do things that create crema. You don't need to try to artificially create that. There's zero benefit in doing that. What you want to do is focus on the outcome of the taste of your coffee. Your espresso can taste perfectly excellent with no crema. And it can taste excellent with crema. It's really, that's the bottom line. So that's really all I want to say about crema. I don't think you should focus on it. I don't think you should care about it at all. Go through the process that I outlined, see how the coffee tastes. If you want to tinker with figuring out how to create more pressure, I think that's something that's fun to do. I think as a baseline, this method creates a really great cup of coffee. And that's just all I wanted to say about crema. Don't worry about it, whether it's there or not. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Always happy to talk coffee. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.